Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Well, greetings and felicitations. Happy Friday night, everybody. This is Scott Roberts, Scotty Roberts to all of you. And this is my show, the Intrepid Radio Program, right here on my YouTube channel. We are a podcast right now. We'll soon again be broadcasting via the radio airwaves as soon as we get some situations worked out. And for now, we are a podcast. You can hear us here. You can hear us over on Facebook on a couple of different channels. My channel, the Intrepid Radio Broadcast channel. You can hear us over on X. You can hear us over on Instagram, as well as this YouTube channel. So come on over and join us. And if you don't know, if you're listening elsewhere and you don't know exactly where we are, just go to youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. That's going to be the place where you find the very best chat room. You can talk in the other channels, but if they don't all show up in the chat room, you can't always see what's going on in the chat room. Got to be in the chat room on YouTube to experience that. So I am going to give you the opportunity to do that. So come on over. And let's throw that up and let's put that down. There we are in live living over bright color. And we're happy that you're here tonight. How's your week been going? It's Friday night. Now, traditionally, we have done Friday nights have been ghost nights. And so where we dig into the paranormal and other weird things that are going on out there in paranormal news, ghosty things, my experiences in the paranormal, your experiences in the paranormal. We've covered all kinds of stuff like that. But tonight, we're going to take a little different twist on that. Not that we have not talked about this before, but there's some new evidence that's out there over the last several months that's made some waves on the Shroud of Turin. So we're going to talk about that. If you don't know what the Shroud of Turin is, we'll cover that for a few minutes at the beginning as well. And before we get started, man, I am so tempted to talk about politics, so I'm trying to hold back because there's so much going on. We're just a mere, I think, 42 days from voting day. And you can cast your votes early if you would like. And so I have heard, this whole voting early thing, I've always been against it. I think you should go out on voting day, on election day. I don't care what our technology says. I don't care what else is going on. The best way to vote is to take some time on election day, November 5th this year, and go out and cast your vote. However, there is some thinking on this that says, look, if you want to make a difference and you're afraid of tampering with the election, tampering with the voting system, the day that is the easiest for them to tamper with is election day itself. So there's a lot of people, I know especially on the right, that are saying go out and make use of this. As long as it's there, vote early. Rainey and I are going to vote early. We're going to cast our votes early this year and get them done, get them registered, get them marked in. And I think this is a very important election. And I hope that you will all take part in it. What do they say? Not even a third of America actually goes out and votes. Or in the last election, they say half of voting Americans did. There were over 120 million votes, they say, and maybe closer to 160 million votes. And so what I think you need to do is go out and cast your vote. And cast your vote early. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You can go to the precinct where you vote, your normal voting place. You can go online with your state and find out where to do it and register it online and get your early ballot sent to you. And you can do that and it can be verified and you can be pretty darn certain that your vote's going to tally and be counted. Now, this year, the election, of course, and I'm sorry my lights are so bright, washes me out a bit. I haven't had time to do anything with them. If you're watching this as opposed to just listening to it, I know it washes out all the scarring on my eyes right now, which are getting better. So thanks for everybody's good thoughts and prayers on that. I went to the doctor the other day. He said maybe by the end of October, I'll start looking normal again. So right now, I just look overly tired all the time because everything is pulled up, cut out, stitched together, and it makes my eyes look funny. So I want to welcome people who are already filtering in. Got Randall Flagg is over there and Monica over in the chat room. And I see a whole bunch of you out there. You can come on in and join the chat room as well. And my daughter is standing here on the other side of the computer wanting to talk to me, knowing I have already started my radio program. And all my kids know to not come and interrupt, but they do anyway. And so what do you need?
Can I borrow this? Our radio's a phone charger, and my phone's also about to die.
Yeah, but I need it back.
I'll bring it back.
All right. Thank you. There it is. There's the, what have I always said? The best thing about working at home, having my office at home, having my studio at home is that I'm always around my wife and kids. Conversely, the worst thing about working at home and having my studio at home is I'm always around my wife and kids. So it's a mixed bag, a grab bag of good and evil. Good and evil in the studio of Scotty Roberts. And so sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. The familial interruptions by my kids, my wife rarely comes in and interrupts for anything. And she stays away and she tries to keep them away. And she had to run back up to her office or her workplace tonight to help some people that are there. Hey, Roger Rabbit, good to see you. Let's see, what does Randall Flagg say here? Georgia wants to hand count all ballots, so no questions about how many there are. There you go. And I think Georgia should, because there's been so many problems they found with the Georgia voting system. So I want to see that happen. And of course, you all know where I stand on the election, who I support. I got no problem saying who I support. I just noticed that this is shining light, and I don't like that. There you go. There's my lovely wife, Rainey. She's here in spirit and photograph. So you all know where I stand and who I'm going to vote for. I've made that abundantly clear. Who you vote for is your conscience. But I would implore you to look at the issues. I hear people that say they want to vote for Harris because she stands for reproductive rights and the rights of women over their own bodies. Well, you know what? So does the right. They just have different points of view. And the truth of the matter is this. Have you ever heard the left talk about the A word, abortion? They don't even use that word anymore because it's not about abortion anymore. Abortion is not any longer a federal issue. So it's not something that is controlled by the federal government. That's what the Supreme Court ruling did 2 years ago. It took Roe v. Wade. It took the issue of abortion, took it out of the hands of the feds and put it back where it belongs in the states, on the state level. So what do you got? You got an abortion issue, or reproductive rights, they want to call it now, that has nothing to do with the President of the United States. The President of the United States can push legislation, and legislators can vote on it in Congress, but right now the issue has nothing to do with the President of the United States. It has to do with the states. If you're going to wrangle or argue about abortion rights or reproductive rights, go to your state governor, go to your state legislators, not your federal not your congressional legislators, go to your state legislators. And that's where it's all been remanded or pushed back into the states. And remember when we did that a couple of shows on the Constitution of the United States and on the forming of the federal government? Who created our federal government? The states. The states had the power to create the federal government. So if the states created the federal government, who has sway or say or jurisdiction over the federal government? The states. So we are the United States of America. The federal government was set up to do certain things, set up to do military protection, border protection, the welfare of the people in that respect. Those words have been used to try to bring that over into welfare issues and healthcare issues and so on. That is not a federal issue. All of those issues are state-run issues. Now, the federal government, as we know, can do things in those areas, but only by permission of the states and the legislators who've been elected to go to Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate to be able to vote on those things. So if you're voting for the Democrats because it's going to give you what you believe is the rights over your own body, that's not what's happening. That's not who they are. They do not have that jurisdiction or power. You've got somebody in that office who might support your point of view. But let me ask you, when it comes to issues, if you are a singular issue voter, I'm going to vote because only the border, or only abortion, or only gay rights, or whatever it might be, what if you are voting for a party that is strong on that issue that you support, but very weak on foreign policy, very weak on diplomacy, very weak on immigration issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So what it behooves us all to do is to learn and understand what it is our government is capable of doing, what they have the right to do, and which candidate is going to be a better leader in the world. They call the President of the United States, has been called for many decades, the leader of the free world. And if the president is stop, Scotty, says JP, I can't stop. I can't stop now, Jason. Stop right now. So if the leader of the free world is out there, does the rest of the world care where we stand on reproductive rights? Oh, yeah. JP says, first of all, he says, stop, Scotty. Then he says, stop right now. Then he says, we can't expect people to know about their government. I just saw a great Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown, and it had Linus looking back to Lucy, who's at the desk behind him writing, and he said, stop worrying. They aren't going to teach us the things that help us resist them. Speaking of the government. Monica S. in the chat room says, I wouldn't mind the state part, except just that it changed every 2 years, having a long-term decision and minimal changes made on new science, technology, etc. Maybe, but flip-flopping medical care, etc. Yeah, there certainly are. You are right about that, Monica. There's a lot of kinks there. But states have their own constitutions. The only rule of the state, for the state's constitution, rule you could call it, is they legally cannot countermand the Constitution of the United States. They have to fall in line with the Constitution of our nation. But, yeah, I'm not sure how they teach it still, says Randall Flagg. Let's see, I didn't want to just gloss over your statement there, Monica. The state part, it changed every 2 years. Federal government issues change every 2 years too. Well, now Roe v. Wade was in play for almost 50 years, if not 50 years. And before it got moved back to the states. And all along the way, there's all this debate and all this. The abortion issue became a thing. You didn't even want to enter into discussions with anybody about it because everybody's so opinionated about it. I'm hearing all these things from the left saying, this is what Trump will do. And then, but I don't believe him. You know why? Because I've listened to Trump and his policies for too long. Trump is not anti-abortion. There might be people within the conservative movement that are anti-abortion altogether. You can't abort at all. Even in the case of incest, rape, or the life of the mother. I am a firm believer. So is Trump. So is J.D. Vance. They mischaracterized both of them on that issue. Both of them stand for the right of the woman to choose, but to also place constitutional protections over the unborn. And when you do that, you can say there are certain terms under which you can abort life of the mother, rape, things like that. And so I don't want to get, this show isn't going to be about that issue per se, but I brought that up only as an example to say, if that's the only issue you're voting on, you better take a deep, long look at what else your candidate stands for. How do they stand on inflation? How do they stand on the economy? How do they stand on domestic oil? Where do they stand on our stance in the world? All of these things need to be taken into consideration when you're making your vote. Who is going to run the country the best way in the world? It's very important. Jason says maybe if people voted more responsibly and thoughtfully rather than with their feels or on party lines, etc., there would be more consistency and stability. Unfortunately, the majority doesn't seem to do that. And JP is right. That is not what the general public does. General public votes from its gut. And so here is what I am hoping is going to happen. I'm hoping there is going to be a groundswell. I've got my candidate that I'm going to vote for. I unabashedly support Trump. Oh, how can you support Trump? Some people say, and it's because I believe he did a good job and he's going to do a good job again. Everybody that seems to want to criticize Trump, to me, can never get beyond the orange orangutan in office, the orange clown in office, the idiot in office, the orange idiot, the this, the that, the other thing. And I say, well, what is it about? Why do you hate Trump so much? Well, he's a liar. He lied over 30,000 times during his first term. They quote some number that came out that was compiled by some anti-Trump news media. And yet, when you start examining some of that list, what do you find? Many of those lies of Trump were things such as Trump says, well, we're standing beneath this sunny sky. And a reporter will say, well, actually, it was partly cloudy that day. So Trump lied. It's stupid things like that. There's also things like, you heard it in the last debate, if you paid attention. Kamala Harris brought up the Charlottesville line, where Trump said there are fine people on both sides. Well, that has been debunked many times over the last 6 years. And it has also been, just most recently, debunked by Snopes. Yet she continues to use that line. Why? Because it hooks the people who don't look into it, don't think for themselves. What the Democrats are really hoping for is a really dumb populace that doesn't look into things, that doesn't look into their candidate, that doesn't look into the stances, doesn't look into the lies. We went through last week, we went through the 25 lies that Kamala Harris told in the debate that the moderators did not fact check her on. They're facts, folks. Go look it up, the 25 lies. Go to my Facebook page and you'll find it. You'll find one of the last shows we did, the last few shows, you'll find it there. We went through that list. So Let's see. Well, what does this say here? Elderberry says, "You bad boy, you." Yeah, that's me. If you're talking to me, I was raised middle class, is where they stand. Yeah, I saw the best meme. It showed, all the pagers blowing up of Hezbollah militants and leaders over in Lebanon, north of Israel over there. All those pagers blowing up the other day and killing some of them, many of them. I saw a meme that showed Netanyahu's face, and it said the press asking this question: "What did you have to do with the pagers blowing up?" Netanyahu's answer: "So I was raised in a middle-class neighborhood, ... So, yeah, I've heard Kamala Harris talk about that many, many times. So many times in the last week, her starting with that. All her lines are canned and memorized. If you watch some of the clips that came from her Oprah Winfrey interview, you're going to see the same exact thing. So it's pretty bad. So thank you, Monica. Let's shift gears dramatically because I want to start getting into my topic of the night. And I just wanted to mention politics because it's all part of it. I've got this deck of cards, remember? Affirmators. These are 50 affirmation cards to help you help yourself without self-helpiness. So I got this little deck, and we're going to shuffle and pull a card from this tonight. This isn't necessarily anything like tarot, but let's shuffle this up and see what we get. Oh, boy. These don't shuffle well. Or I don't shuffle well, whichever that is. So let's, here, I'm going to splay the deck. Somebody choose a card. Thank you very much, Monica. I'll choose this card. Okay, here we go. I got to put on my cheating glasses. All right. This card says positive thinking. Here's your affirmator for the day. In the garden of my mind, I water the good thoughts and weed out the bad ones. I throw in forgiveness and empathy seeds by the handful if I want, and I take a lawnmower to that jealousy and resentment patch. I'm a pretty badass mind gardener. So there you go. Groom your mind to be positive thinking. Positive thinking doesn't mean we don't ever have negative thoughts. It means that we work and we do our very best to nurture the good thoughts, weed out the bad ones. It's like I said this morning. I put up a little thing on my Facebook because I was driving the kids to school this morning, and it gets really busy down the main street going into the schools. And as I'm driving, you come to the side streets where people are trying to turn to get in, and I see cars. I see people they speed up to get across the intersection, and they don't let people trying to get in. And I said, if everybody would just be decent and every other car let a car in. And there's not that many of them. There's 80 cars going this way. There's 4 trying to get in. Well, every other car lets somebody in. And if I could, I'd get out and I'd run up to the car in front of me and shake him by the collar and going, "Why didn't you let that guy in, asshole?" And so this morning is that a negative thought? And I thought it occurred to me this morning that sometimes I'm very kind simply to spite all those unkind people around me. Now, I let people in because I like to be let in when I'm trying to get in line. So I let them in onto the main road. And I do that. And sometimes I'll let 2 in because the guy in front of me the 2 cars in front of me didn't let anybody in. And I just go, 2 of you, go. Then I wave to the next one. I'm going. Next guy sometimes doesn't let the next guy in. I'm like, what's with you people? Mostly, though, if you demonstrate it and live it and show it, people are going to follow suit. And I've seen that an awful lot, that people will follow suit. So I wonder if is being kind because you want to spike the people who aren't kind? There's some kind of karmic salad going on there. Does karma go, wait a minute? So I don't know. So demotivating poster cards. What does that say? I got to blow it up so I can read it without my glasses. Demotivating poster cards would be more entertaining. Well, maybe I should find a deck of those. Maybe somebody out there needs to send me a deck of those. So there you go. There's your affirmators. These affirmators can get a little tongue-in-cheek some days. And then we'll do what time we got. It's already 9:29. Holy cats. But I did want to do also a Spark Courage, 50 Ways to Be Bold. And this is that faux matchbox that I bought at a garage sale. And each one of these faux matches that's in here, they look like that. They have a saying on top of it. And it's called 50 Ways to Be Bold, if you've never caught this on this show before. And their little saying on the back of this box says, discover your inner bravery with this box of 50 faux matchsticks featuring prompts that will inspire you to take leaps, face your fears, and speak your mind. So I like these cards for that reason, or these matchsticks, because, and it helps me extemporaneously expound on something. So let's see, let's just take a bunch out, and I'm just going to I think we've almost hit every one of these over the last few years, but let's pull one out just for shits and giggles tonight. Let's do one. What have I got here? We just did that one recently. Shows you how well that mixed up. Let's see. Okay, how about this one? Have you ever tried this? You know what this says? Here, I'll hold it up so maybe you can read it. Start a conversation with a stranger and see if you can make them laugh. First of all, do you ever start conversations with strangers? I tend to do that. I look at my past sometimes when I was a bit more meek, when I was a younger man, maybe an older teen would be more accurate. And I had no confidence at all, lacked confidence, didn't like talking to people. I was in theater and stuff like that. I enjoyed that kind of thing. But man, you put me in front of people and I turned into a Kamala Harris. So here's something to grow your boldness. Start a conversation with a complete stranger and see what you can do to make them laugh. Now, sometimes I'll be in a pub or something like that, and a bunch of us are laughing, and I can see some, or I can even insert myself into people's conversations I don't even know. I'll be sitting somewhere and I'll hear a conversation. I just did this the other day. I can't think of where I was, but couple of people were talking, and I said out of the blue, I wasn't part of their conversation. And I said, you know what? I said, I overheard what you're talking about. I said, I had the same experience and it happened like this to me. And I made them laugh and they laughed. And so do you do that? Why is that a good thing? What does that do to spark your courage and to make you bold, to build your boldness? I believe what that does is it allows you to express what you're thinking to other people, impromptu. No study, nothing else, but let people know, hey, I'm open. I'm open to talking to people. I've never had anybody go, yeah, fuck off. Hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean it won't. But I like to talk to people. This show should show you, prove to you, demonstrate to you, illustrate for you that I like to talk. I can talk. I can hold my own in a conversation. I can go into a place where I don't know anybody and I can spark up conversations. And you make yourself available to be open. So that's all that is. It's a practice. So how many of you have ever done that? Walk into a crowd and you're able to open up. Monica says, yet. What did you say? How Saw that meme was great. We more entertaining. Yet. Not sure what you're responding to there, Monica, unless you're going, yet, here's my view on this. That's a possibility. You got something to say? Go ahead. And by the way, if you want one of these fantastically illustrated Son of a Patriot mugs, you can go to my Son of a Patriot Etsy page. As a matter of fact, I don't have it on here. Let's put it on. We usually have it running across the bottom. There we go. You'll find it in there. My Etsy.com/shop/Son of a Patriot. And you can see all the things that we being me, do and create. And my wife helps me create some things that we use for promotional materials, just for fun T-shirts and designs and coffee mugs and things. We got my Star Trek tumblers are all on there. All different kinds. And this is one of the mugs that we've done. That's also on a shirt and a hoodie. So if you want to go take a look at some of the things we've got over there, go take a peek. Let's see. Yet. GF yourself. GF yourself. Go fuck yourself? I haven't had anybody say that to me yet for trying to join in and make them laugh. So anyway, cheers to that. Let's move into our topic. You all heard of the Shroud of Turin. Anybody here not know what the Shroud of Turin is? Have you not seen the Shroud of... Yeah, I don't know. It's are we playing over on Instagram? Yeah, there it is. I see it. Any of you not know what the Shroud of Turin is? I'll give you just a little background. If you do know already and you're already familiar with what it's all about, here, I'm going to throw up one picture, which I should have preloaded and I did not. Let me see if I've got it saved the right way. Let's see. So I can bring it up. The shroud, of course, is a piece of cloth. It's a piece of linen that is a relic in the Roman Catholic Church. You don't have to be Roman Catholic to believe in it. Let's see if I even have it up here. I thought I saved it. Perhaps I did not. So, well, we can go without showing the shroud. If you look at the graphic we have for tonight's show, that's the face right there that's on the shroud. And it's a piece of linen cloth that shows the body of a man front and back. And it's one piece. And it's as if this cloth shows the back side and it wraps over the top of the head and down the front side. And so it's one piece of cloth showing the body into the front and back. And the Catholic Church has held that this is the burial cloth of Jesus. And of course, because it shows a crucified man, a man who's severely beaten, a man who is crucified. It shows the wounds from crucifixion. It shows wounds on the head from crown of thorns. It shows beating on the face. It shows the images of having been lashed with a Roman. Now I'm forgetting what they call it. Not a cat o' nine tails, but it was a leather thongs on a handle with 3 little balls on each one, lead balls that would cut into the skin, and this kind of lashing. And so the image of a man is on there. And I brought up just a little way to deliver this for you a little easier, because it's a detailed thing. But the Shroud of Turin is, I'm going to put on my glasses. It's also known as the Holy Shroud in the Catholic Church. It's a length of linen cloth that bears a faint image of front and back of a man. It's been venerated for centuries, especially by members of the Catholic Church, as the actual burial shroud used to wrap the body of Jesus of Nazareth after his crucifixion, and upon which Jesus' bodily image is miraculously imprinted. The human image in the shroud can be discerned more clearly in black and white photographic negative because the image on the shroud is actually a negative. So the way they discovered this was, and it didn't really occur to anybody until some of the photographers who went out there in the late 70s and were allowed from the Jet Propulsion Laboratories, JPL, to go in and take a look at the cloth, take pictures of it, and they noticed when he was developing his negatives, he was like, whoa, that image really stands out. And does anybody not know what it looks like? If you don't, I can call this image up for you and show you what we got here and show you how it looks in the negative. And so this thing has been questioned for centuries. And of course, in modern times, they were decrying it as it's a painted fake. It's a forgery. It's not really an image of a man. Somebody did a great job of counterfeiting this thing. And of course, it was made, some people say, over 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 years ago. If this thing was made, it was made as a fake to try to lead people to believe something that isn't so. And so they did all kinds of testing on it. Well, I've mentioned my friend Barry Schwartz, who was the photographer who went out there with the JPL laboratory back in the late 70s. He's a Jewish man. He says, I went out, he says, I didn't have any particular axe to grind, thinking already that the thing's a fake, but let's go take our pictures and do our research. And he said, the first thing I could tell you is that in the first 10 minutes that I was looking at this shroud, I could tell you emphatically it wasn't a forgery. It wasn't a photograph. It wasn't painted. He said, this image, he says, what I didn't know at that time is what the hell made the image. So he took all his pictures. He did studies. He started the website shroud.com. You can go look at that anytime you want. That website is about 35 years old now. And Barry Schwartz is still, he's getting a little older now, but he is still somebody I want to get on this show again to talk about this and some of the latest. But he is somebody that said, being a Jewish boy and going in and seeing this, he says, what are you going to believe? And he says he has really come to the conclusion that this can't be anything else other than the burial shroud of Christ. And this is a Jewish man saying this. And he said, I don't even think I'm wrong on that anymore. Used to use guarded language with it. And so there's all kinds of new evidence that has come up. So that's the shroud. That's basically what it is. When it was first found, they say documented history of the piece of cloth dates back to about 1354, when it was exhibited in the new Collegiate Church of Liry, a village in north central France. And the shroud was denounced as a forgery by the Bishop of Troyes in 1389. Oh, it's a fraud. And it was acquired by the House of Savoy in 1453 and later deposited in a chapel in Chambéry, where it was damaged by fire in 1532. And in 1578, the Savoys mounted the shroud to their new capital in Turin, where it's remained ever since, 1578. And since 1683, it's been kept in the Chapel of the Holy Shroud, which was designated for that purpose by the architect, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And there was the microscopist, if you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, Walter Macron found, based on his examination of samples taken in 1978 from the surface of the shroud using adhesive tape, that the image of the shroud had been painted with a dilute solution of red ochre pigment in a gelatin medium. And Macron found that the apparent blood stains were painted with vermilion pigment, also in gelatin medium. and Macron's findings were disputed by other researchers, and the nature of the image on the shroud continues to be debated. Now, radiocarbon dating established that the shroud is from the medieval period, not from the time of Jesus. This corresponds with its first documented appearance in 1354. Now, defenders of the authenticity of the shroud have questioned this finding, usually on the basis that the samples tested might have been contaminated or taken from a repair to the original fabric, which is there. You can see the stitching. And such fringe theories have been refuted by carbon dating experts and others based on evidence from the shroud itself. And so this goes on and on and on. I can go through the description of it, and then there has been modern new DNA, carbon-14 tests that dated all the way back 2,000 years. Pollens from the Holy Lands have been found on it. I'm going to see if there's anything else here. Miraculous image, Vatican position. We don't need to go into all of that. There's a scientific analysis of it, the early studies, 69 to 73, for preservation, tests for pigments. In October of 1978, a team of scientists affiliated with STIRP took 32 samples from the surface of the shroud using adhesive tape. Of those samples, 18 were taken from areas of the shroud that showed a body or a blood image, while 14 were taken from non-image areas. And the chemical microscopist, okay, I don't even know how to pronounce that, microscopist. So microscopist, is that how they pronounce it? A micro guy. Walter Macron, a leading expert, he was the one that said the shroud's body image had been painted with dilute pigments. Other members of STIRP rejected Macron's conclusions and concluded, based on their own examination of the shroud and the tape samples, the image on the shroud could not be explained by the presence of pigments. Now, something Barry Shroud got into, or Barry Schwartz got into about the shroud, even though some said that these things were painted with pigments. Pigment on fiber can only adhere to fiber if it goes a certain number of microns deep on the fabric. And they found that the image on the shroud is less than half the number of microns needed for pigment to adhere to fiber. So that was all scientifically debunked. It's not pigment. It wasn't painted. So what is it? And so now there is new, and so there's been new, I think they've tried to do DNA tests. I haven't heard conclusive stuff on that. There have been new tests on the pigments. There have been new radiocarbon datings from different areas of the shroud within the image area of the shroud. And they're finding that, well, yeah, indeed, it does date back 2,000 years to ancient Israel, Judea. So Monica says, does the Holy Spirit make all people tingle, or do people have other touches or feelings different? I don't know. I can't tell you that. I think it all depends on what the Holy Spirit does with individuals. And so I don't know for sure how that works. Tinglies, maybe some people are more pragmatic and they get, I get filled with the Holy Spirit, but I don't feel anything. It's all mental, or it's all intellectual to me. There are intellectual believers, and then there are touchy-feely believers that I think can get the tinglies. I don't know, Monica. I couldn't tell you for sure on that one. But if we start looking into some of this current science that's come out, let's see. Let me go to the new evidence here. There's new evidence that says the shroud is not a European forgery. There's new scientific tests that have been conducted on the famous Shroud of Turin. It's revealed that the flax used to make the linen was the flax of a kind that was grown only in the Middle East. The result of isotope tests provide new evidence that the shroud is the actual garment that we used to cover the body of Jesus Christ following his crucifixion. Now, mind you, this is information I'm pulling from the Catholic Herald. So their position is going to be one that this is the shroud of Jesus. And their starting point is one of, can we prove it's the shroud of Jesus, or is it something else? So the isotopes, they're saying, prove that it was the actual garment that was wrapped around Jesus of Nazareth following his crucifixion. It's not a forgery. Fragments of the cloth taken from the shroud show that its flax originated in the western Levant, a swath of land occupied today by Israel, Lebanon, and the west parts of Jordan and Syria. So William Meacham, the American archaeologist who commissioned the study, said, with a probable Near Eastern origin, new doubts must be raised about interpreting the shroud as simply a fake relic made in medieval Europe. And new questions arise about what the image on the cloth actually signifies. If this is an actual object, if this is indeed linked to Jesus of Nazareth, what does that do for you? I think some of that will depend on who you believe Jesus of Nazareth really is. Some people don't even believe he existed, that he was an historical fiction. Others believe he was a great holy man, but he was not the Son of God. Others will claim he is the Son of God, the Messiah, the kinsman redeemer of Israel. And then others will say, well, Jesus would have left no image of himself behind. These are people that are believers that Jesus existed. He wouldn't have left an image of himself behind because people would worship it. And so the big question is, do we know that for Jesus? If Jesus is indeed the Son of God, do we know the mind of God? God said, we're not going to leave that. We're not going to leave that behind. Well, what if they did? So there's the question. What if it's not Jesus at all? What is it then? Because there's an awful lot of mystery about this thing. The possibility that this cloth is actually the burial shroud of Jesus is strengthened by this new evidence, says William Meacham. In my view, that remains the best explanation for the shroud because of all of its anomalous details. Now, as a member of the board, and this is the new evidence, by the way, these isotopes, finding that the linen, the flax linen that was used on this cloth was made in the Levant, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, that region of the world. As a member of the board of directors of the Shroud of Turin Education and Research Association, STERA, Meacham obtained permission to test 5 of 7 strands in the possession of the group. The threads originated from a sample known as the Raes, R-A-E-S, piece that was removed from the shroud in 1973 for textile research. Now, 14 threads were provided by the Turin Archdiocese to the physicist Ray Rogers, a member of the American scientific team that had conducted the on-site study of the shroud in 1978, and which were later passed on to STERA. This is where the JPL laboratories came in, and Barry Schwartz. Now, the testing was undertaken at the Stable Isotopes Laboratory of the University of Hong Kong, which is able to test very small samples of even less than 1 milligram. Now, Meacham said the Eastern origin of the shroud is important because it reinforces other features that point in that direction. He explained that the most notable was the pollen. Even though many identifications have since been discounted, certain aspects, certain species taken together still indicate an Eastern Mediterranean presence. So similarly, the crown of thorns on the shroud, in the helmet style rather than the Roman circlet, is a feature characteristic of Asia Minor and the Levant. The crown of thorns, by the way, folks, is still on the head, and you can see the image of leaves and thorn branches and thorns themselves with actual oxidized blood that has come out of those wounds that run down the face. This is something, there's more and more. It's almost like the Bible code. They say, oh, there's new things coming up all the time. Well, with this, the research of the shroud, there's more and more things they can do to research the image that's on the shroud, finding things that they didn't know were originally there. And one of those things is a crown of thorns. It was like a cap put on whoever is on the image on the shroud. There's a cap crown of thorns, and you can see the leaves or the individual leaves pressed down kind of flat once they pulled the shroud over and tied it to him. So it's a helmet style rather than the Roman circlet, which is characteristic of Asia Minor and the Levant, the cap style helmet. Now, another is the claim of coins on the eyes. In the shroud image that matched a documented instance from a 2nd century burial in Judea, there are coin images on the eyes on this face. Here, if I call this up again, and we look at the graphic I have here, there are actually coins that were laid on top of the eye sockets, that they have discerned what the coins. I don't think they can read the images on the coins, but there are coins there, which was a traditional practice in the Middle Eastern region during the time of Jesus. I find that very fascinating. This was an impressive confirmation of a hypothesis generated by computer 3D analysis in 1977, at a time when there was no known instance outside of Israel of such a practice in antiquity. So the shroud's been held in Turin, Italy since 1578, arriving from Chambéry, France, where it had been kept since the 1350s. It made a dramatic entrance on the European intellectual stage in 1898 when the first photographs were published. Now, by the way, also found on the shroud is that the image on the shroud has a belt around his waist. They also found a little chain link, like a little tiny chain link necklace that was broken, almost as if maybe somebody took that and laid it on top of the body at burial before they put him in the shroud. They found that he had the leather straps wrapped around his arm. If you ever look at an Orthodox Jew praying at the Wailing Wall, you see photographs today. They have the leather straps for prayer that are wrapped around their arms, the little box on them. There's a little box on the forehead that's wrapped around with a strap. There are things like that they found. Some of these, this forehead thing would have been put on him after death, of course, or it was still on him from the garden when he was praying. If this is indeed Jesus. So what they have found is that the image on the shroud bears a lot of interesting details that they keep finding as they look deeper and deeper into the image on the shroud. Let's see. It was studied in the mid-20th century by the French surgeon Pierre Barbet. He went on to write a book about the injuries of Christ's passion called A Doctor at Calvary. Calvary being the Latinized word for Golgotha, the place of the skull, the place of execution. In 1978, the team of American scientists was granted a week-long on-site direct examination of the cloth and allowed to take sticky tape samples and tons of photographs. In the end, they were unable to explain what had caused the image, leaving a mystery that persists today. But their final report asserted that it all had come, the image was from a human body, even though they could not determine what it was. There were some theories that came up that decaying bodies can leave imagery like this, but nothing like this. Nothing as detailed as this. In 1988, a sample was taken. It was divided into pieces and dated by 3 prominent laboratories from 1260, 1390. Results which cast grave doubt on the shroud's authenticity. But further studies were not permitted by the Archdiocese of Turin. And what they're finding, though, is that many of these things that dated on the shroud to the 12 and 1300s were things that were DNA that was left by the people handling the shroud leaving their DNA on it. Studies conducted in 2012 and 2015 on samples taken earlier found, however, that the linen sheet probably does date from the time of Jesus. In 2017, a team from the Hospital University Padua, Italy, led by Matteo Bevilacqua, conducted a forensic study of the imprint and found it was of a person who suffered and died in exactly the same manner that Christ did as recorded in the Gospels. You've got the crucifixion wounds, not through the palm of the hand, through the wrist, which is how it was done, the wrist being considered part of the hand, through the feet, the spear thrust in the side, the gush of blood from that, the crown of thorns, the whipping wounds, and so on. Scourging was the term that was used for that. So, writing in the Open Journal of Trauma, the team speculated that the cause of death of whoever's image was on the shroud was a heart attack, complicated by heart rupture through, let's see if I can pronounce this word, hemopericardium, in a subject crucified with the nailing of hands and feet. They also saw signs of severe emotional stress, depression. How do you find this on the image in the shroud? Severe hypovolemic traumatic shock, acute respiratory failure at an early stage by crucifixion, and causalgia, or chronic pain in a limb, blunt trauma following a fall with paralysis of the entire right brachial plexus, the shoulder nerves, right shoulder dislocation, pulmonary contusion with hemothorax, lung injury, cardiac contusion, heart injury, probable left ulnar proximal paralysis, and right foot dislocation from stretching during the crucifixion. These are all things that they found on the body image on the shroud. This medical team from the Open Journal of Trauma, which was from the Hospital University of Padua, Italy. And so all these signs, emotional stress, depression, all these different things, dislocated shoulder. Now, you know, when they crucified someone, it was not the way, and we found this through historical forensics, not the way you'd see it in the old movies or the old pictures. They nailed him on a cross. He carried this big cross beam or a cross, and they dragged it through the town. He fell, and they took him and they nailed him to the cross and pulled it up and sank it in the ground. There's a lot of evidence that the way Roman crucifixions took place, because this was a common form of execution. And remember, in the biblical story, they had a thief on one side of him and a murderer on the other. Or was it a murderer or was it a insurrectionist? I can't remember. And so these guys were all crucified together. And the thought is that they carried the cross beam, the singular beam to which the hands were nailed. They carried the cross beam, and then they would lay the person on the ground, nail his wrist joints into the cross, and hoist the cross beam up with just his shoulders supporting him. And they would drop it into a pre-made bracket on a pre-made scaffold, and that had uprights, and then they would nail the feet to the uprights. And that the cause of death was not so much getting nails, spikes pounded into your wrists and your ankles, but that they would take and they would bend the knees upward toward the chest. Once the person's already hanging on this crossbeam, they've dropped the crossbeam in, dislocating shoulders. They would push the knees up to the chest, nail the ankles in, and that would depress the diaphragm, make it very almost impossible to breathe. So the person on the cross being executed had to lift up on nails on the wrists and push up on nails on the ankles in order to take a breath. And then they drop back down. And of course, their shoulders are dislocated. by the drop. That was the intent of the drop into the bracket. So you've got all of these things that we found have been Roman crucifixion. Remember, it wasn't unique with Jesus of Nazareth. It was a long practice of execution. And so what we've learned about crucifixion is this is how it was done. And then there was a scene where they came by after Jesus had died already. They saw he was dead, it said, and so they didn't break his legs. That's the reference in one of the Gospels. Well, one of the practice was when they'd hung up there long enough, suffered long enough, been tortured long enough, the soldiers would come by with a big club and they'd break their legs so they could no longer push up on the legs to take breaths. Then what would happen? They would die of asphyxiation. And they saw that Jesus was already dead, it says, so they didn't break his legs. And then there was the piercing in the side, up through one of the ribs to the heart. And so they thrust the spear into him, and it said blood and water came out. The water sac around the heart. So this whole study of all this forensics inspired a 2022 paper by Reverend Patrick Polsino, a priest in Southwark, Southwark, I guess it is, and he formerly an NHS consultant neurologist who proposed that the shoulder injury caused a huge internal bleed, which resulted in the collapse of his circulatory system. So up to 3 pints of blood spilled out from the cavity where the blood accumulated, he wrote in the Catholic Medical Quarterly, which tallies with when the side of Jesus was speared by a Roman lance, as recorded in the Gospel of John. Now, while the latest findings counter the accusation that the shroud is only a forgery, mysterious remains and Meacham mysterious remains, and Meacham admits, though, that the carbon dating of the shroud is yet to be resolved, and that there is a slight overlap of a couple of samples of flax from Western Europe with those of Israel. Those are some of the outstanding controversies that still exist. So there are portions of the shroud that were sewn in when the shroud was partially burned in the fire in the early 1500s. And so that to me is really interesting. All of this stuff is really interesting. When you can see all of that from medical experts doing forensics on the image on the shroud, and they can pull all these things out, how does a 13th century forger know how to paint all that with paint that doesn't adhere with enough microns to stick to fiber? There is a good question, huh? Let's see. What else have we got here? I got a little bit more here on this. Maybe I do. Oh, I may have thought that's something I don't need to look at. I pulled up a bunch of articles. Take a look at what we can look at about this and learn about this. I've got this new evidence supporting the Shroud of Turin is just too strong to ignore. And this is by journalist William West. And although the Shroud of Turin once seemed to be discredited by carbon dating in the 1980s, new research has cast doubt on the carbon dating in the 1980s, on that carbon dating, and produced dramatic evidence that the shroud could very possibly confirm that it's the resurrection of Jesus being depicted there. This journalist said he spent 5 years researching his recently published book, Riddles of the Shroud, Questions Science Can't Answer. And the evidence suggests the shroud covered Jesus at the point of resurrection. And the evidence is so strong that it's hard to imagine anyone with an open mind seeing it as anything less than compelling. And despite the fact that most people seem to think the research on the Shroud came to an end with the carbon dating in 1988, it hasn't. It's become still the most researched single artifact in history. And there's still a lot of question on the carbon dating because some of the carbon dating they've done dates it back 2,000 years. So the bottom line is that science has shown the image on the cloth is an impossible image, one that cannot be replicated. And one of the main reasons is, as scientists have now confirmed, the image on the Shroud had to be caused by a mysterious burst of some kind of energy or light. That's electromagnetic radiation is the only thing that all of science has been able to conclude could have created that image on the Shroud. And so, in short, the evidence indicates the Shroud was wrapped around a real body that simply dematerialized without disturbing the perfectly formed blood clots on the cloth. And that could only happen through an event like that described in the Gospels of the Resurrection. Maybe there's other things that could have caused it, but from a religious point of view, that's the only thing that could have caused it. An event that, as the Gospels state, freed Jesus' body from material constraints. So the only evidence that's challenged the Shroud's authenticity, the carbon dating, has now been shown to be flawed. So raw data from the carbon tests released after 29 years by a Freedom of Information action has revealed that the tests were not definitive at all. The fact is confirmed by historical research indicating the Shroud was around long before the carbon date that dated it in the Middle Ages. The evidence has been further strengthened by new dating tests that have dated the linen cloth to the 1st century, as we've already covered. And so the only piece of evidence that appeared to contradict the Shroud's authenticity no longer even makes sense. So 4 research papers authored by a total of 12 experts have now been published in peer-reviewed academic journals, all agreeing the carbon dating was flawed and called for a new carbon dating to be carried out. And folks, this is one of those things where I ask the question. I like to be as pragmatic and factual as possible when I look into weird things. Yet, we all know that we are surrounded by much more than the physical realm that we are familiar with. We know there's more to this world. We know there's more to this universe, although many of us can't define it. We can't tell you what else is out there. We can tell you things we've seen or heard or experienced or touched. We can't define it all the time. We put our definitions on those things. But you can't tell me that the world is simply physical. There's much more to it than that. And that's, I think, where this Shroud fits into it. It's like Bigfoot. Does Bigfoot exist? I was going to do a show on Bigfoot tonight. And I thought, I couldn't really come across anything that was very compelling to give new information without reading a whole new book on the topic. But so I looked this up. I came across, there's new evidence out there. I want to see what it is. So like Bigfoot, like ghosts, like all UFOs, all these things, we say there are mountains of evidence for these things. People just don't want to accept because it's not quite enough evidence. That's where the Shroud is. So much evidence, so much debunking that has been debunked. And so the view has been that this is the Shroud of Christ and that the dating was flawed on the carbon dating, that this view has been supported by many Shroud researchers, including nuclear engineer Robert Rucker, who has written extensively on the shortcomings of the carbon dating. The call for a new carbon dating has also been supported by journalist Philip Ball, a former editor of the journal that first published the carbon dating results in Nature journal. However, church authorities should resist being pressured into further carbon-14 tests on the cloth for a number of reasons, including the fact that carbon dating the shroud will never be definitive because the cloth is clearly contaminated and because the tests could be destructive. So when the carbon dating was first proposed, a multidisciplinary committee of scientists recommended that 7 samples from at least 3 separate areas of the cloth would be needed for carbon dating to be credible. But the carbon daters ended up taking only 1 sample, dividing it into 3 pieces. So why would the church agree to destructive testing now? Testing that would require taking 7 more samples of the cloth, given that the latest evidence indicates the shroud's been contaminated by carbon-14. And so why do it at a time when the evidence that the shroud is authentic is more powerful than ever? At the same time, there are now newer, non-destructive dating tests that appear to be more accurate and less likely to be affected by carbon-14 contamination. One of these tests, the wide-angle X-ray scattering, recently dated the shroud to the 1st century AD. If that's accurate, Jesus, they say, was crucified around 30 AD. So the results were released only last year by a team headed by a member of Italy's National Research Council, Dr. Liberato Di Caro. The test is non-destructive and can be repeated many times using a single sample. So 3 other dating tests by engineering measurements expert Professor Guido Fanti and colleagues at the University of Padua have confirmed the 1st century date. So really, why would the church rush into further carbon dating of the shroud? Some researchers argue the evidence for the shroud's authenticity is now so compelling that further dating is unnecessary. So the evidence that exists now confirms that the image on the 4-meter long cloth, roughly 12-foot long cloth, is an impossible image, one that only can be explained by some kind of supernatural event. What would that supernatural event be? The fact is, the image on the shroud has never been replicated by science. It's because the evidence suggests it can't be. It's a high-resolution photographic negative 3D image caused by a discoloration of a uniform layer of microscopic linen microfibers, something that could only be caused by a finely tuned burst of electromagnetic radiation that came from the body itself. What did Cynthia say? I just saw a comment pop up. Scotty, your eyes look much better tonight. Thank you. They're getting there. Still swelled up. Doc said it'll be another month probably before I'll see the end of that. It's always a pleasure to watch your show where we get much more of the truth to have an informed opinion. Thank you, Cynthia. Much love to you and your family and to yours as well. And Claudette, I see, also asked how my eyes are feeling. My eyes feel tired all the time, but they're not. They're just stretched. It's everything. It's almost like it was almost like an eye lift. Frankly, some of the same procedure, probably. The muscles were loosened in here from the cataract surgery, so they had to open it up, take off all this extra skin on my brain, just cut out a swath of skin and pull the muscles back up and stitch it all together. That's what you're seeing, stuff in here that's still my stitches. If the light wasn't so bright, you could see it. So they're feeling okay, just tired all the time. And I can't rub them. Oh, I just want to get in there with my knuckles and go and rub my eyes some days. But I don't. I can't. So I'll ruin that all until it all heals up fully. It's only been a couple of weeks. It was 2 weeks yesterday. So the shroud's never been replicated. They're saying only electromagnetic energy, radiation that came from the body itself. The authenticity of the shroud is supported by more evidence than most people realize. The book Riddles of the Shroud lists 99 pieces of evidence that support its authenticity. That evidence includes microscopic deposits on the shroud of extremely rare soil found in Jerusalem, and microscopic deposits of flower pollen from Jerusalem. Now, let me ask you something. If this is Christ and God didn't want people to know that it was him, why are there certain things on that shroud? Are we like circumventing God? Ha ha, God, you didn't want us to know this was Jesus, but we found a way to find out. Or as it's always been there, and God always knew someday they're going to figure this one out. It's a mystery to uncover. It's a discovery to be made. There's also chemical evidence that the blood on the cloth is high in the blood chemical bilirubin, something that's consistent with a body that suffered some kind of torture. And the man who headed the carbon dating of the shroud, the British Museum's Dr. Michael Tite, has stated that he's come to accept the cloth was not created by a medieval forger, as the carbon daters claimed at the time of the carbon dating. Dr. Tite said in a BBC interview that he believes the evidence indicates there was, in fact, a crucified body in the cloth. Too much evidence on the cloth itself. He speculated that the man on the shroud may have been a Christian crusader who was crucified in an act of humiliation by Muslim troops. But that version of events doesn't stand up to scrutiny. It doesn't fit the evidence that points to a supernatural rather than a natural event. The supernatural has to be incorporated into this shroud in order for the image to exist there at all. Nevertheless, Dr. Tite's comments provide an important admission that the shroud was not faked up by a medieval forger, as the carbon daters claimed back in 1988 when they released the results that have now been widely criticized. So the evidence for the shroud's authenticity includes confirmation by forensic pathologists that the shroud features anatomical and physiological information unknown in the Middle Ages. The perfect wounds and blood deposits on the cloth were not disturbed by the removal of the body. When you notice that, there's still rivulets on there. It wasn't smeared, it wasn't disturbed. When you dress a wound in a cloth bandage, it sticks hard. And when the bandage is removed, the blood clot breaks up and traces of flesh can be found on the cloth. There's no evidence that the blood deposits on the shroud have been disturbed at all. It appears that the body simply dematerialized in a way that didn't disturb the blood clots, and at the same time leaving behind an image that could not have been created in the Middle Ages any more than in the 1st century. So despite extensive research by scientists, including chemists and physicists, there's no explanation of how the body disappeared from within the shroud. The shroud wasn't just a piece that was laid on, laid over. There are wrinkles in the image and so on to show that it was done in the ancient Jewish and still modern Jewish tradition. They would shroud somebody with one piece, lay them down on it, fold it over their head, back down to their feet, and they would tie strips of the linen around the feet, around the knees, around the arms, around the neck and the head. That this is the way it was done. My own Jewish grandfather was buried back in 1995, and all of his Jewish relatives wanted it done traditionally, not just a plain old wooden box, and he was wrapped in a shroud this way and tied in with ceremony and placed in the ground within 24 hours of death. It's Jewish tradition. The impossibly faint image that was left on the cloth indicates that this event was accompanied by a burst of light, which is the only thing scientists have found to be capable of reproducing the discoloration on the microfibers of a linen cloth. It's not painted, it's discoloration of the fibers of flax. It shows the image. In a fascinating twist to the carbon dating story, it turns out that the electromagnetic radiation is also capable of increasing levels of carbon-14 on a linen cloth. So this was confirmed by the carbon daters themselves after a nuclear scientist wrote to Nature journal at the time of the carbon dating results that were released. But the carbon daters rejected this possibility because they said dead bodies don't emit bursts of electromagnetic energy. The problem is that they were focused on the carbon dating and not on the evidence on the shroud itself. Evidence indicating that an extraordinary event had in fact taken place that left that image on the shroud. The evidence we have now makes it really clear that this event involved a burst of electromagnetic energy, the very thing that can both explain the impossible image on the cloth and the raised levels of carbon-14. But despite this breakthrough, scientists are still unable to replicate the shroud's impossible image. That is, the high-resolution photographic negative, the 3D image that appears on the cloth after the wounds, blood flows, and blood clots had formed. The shroud confirms all the details of the gospel account of Jesus and the resurrection. Now, let me ask you, by the way, with all the study of the shroud, do you think if it was a forgery that was painted, we wouldn't know that by now? According to the gospel account, the first person to believe in the resurrection was the Apostle John, who entered the tomb, examined the empty shroud, and accepted that the resurrection had occurred. And so, as John's account in his own gospel states, he saw and he believed. The fact that the shroud offers powerful evidence for the resurrection, evidence that's now so strong that it should convince any well-instructed jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the shroud is authentic, and also that the resurrection did, in fact, take place. What are your thoughts on that? You can call in to the captain's cabin and we'll discuss this. It's now 10:26 my time, 11:26 out east. Let's take a little break. If you're with us and you need to leave, I'll let you go, but stick around for a little bit more for the after show, the captain's cabin, after these messages that we're going to put up right now. So I want to thank you for being here. If you got to go, I tell you, live long and prosper. And if you can stick around, stay put, because we're going to be right back. Hang on.
The Intrepid Radio Program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid Radio Broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company, or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hi, my dad. So he can take me to Disneyland.
Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep,
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Well, welcome to the captain's cabin, everyone. Arr, you could say arr. Avast, mateys. All right, welcome. If you're still sticking around, this is a time where you can call into this show, and we'll talk about what we talked about tonight. So here is a link. I'm going to post it into the chat room. I will also post it into, it's in the description of the show, wherever you're watching it. But here it is in the chat room. And I'm also going to go over to the Instagram page where we have a few of you still watching over there. And, let's see. Oh, that's weird. Something weird happened to this. Can't seem to post over there. Interesting. I see it's playing over there, but I don't see it. It's got me. Something happened here that keeps me from actually commenting. It's all grayed out, but I can see the image moving. So if you're over on Instagram, come on over to the YouTube page, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. Find this broadcast at the top, and you can come on in and comment over there. Sorry, I can't seem to post. Oh, I had actually put up a post about how to get to the actual show at the beginning, and it's still not posted. Something weird, some little glitch happened on the page, and I'm not sure what it is. But there it is. So, and if I refresh the page, the broadcast will go away. So those of you over there watching, I know I saw James McMichael over there. I saw the Goose Guy over there. You guys can come on over to the YouTube channel if you're still there, and you can join in the conversation. So there we are. All right, everybody. Your chance to call in and discuss this very enigmatic topic. I find it fascinating. Again, this is one of those things that I look at and I say, you know what? This is proof to me that there are things in this world that we can't explain. We think we can explain everything by the scientific method. We can't. We try to explain things by that. What do you do with the things that are left over? The things that you can't explain by science or the scientific methodology. That's something you have to decide for yourself. Now, swimming through all the murk of this whole thing, what conclusion are you left with? Is this the image of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, on this shroud? All the science seems to, there's always dispute on stuff, isn't there? I'm pretty sure, Einstein came up with E equals MC squared, and some other scientists know that ass Einstein is simply wrong. You can have all kinds of things like that go on. So it really, you've got to go through all the murk and come down to the bottom line. The bottom line is that carbon dating was wrong. Some carbon dating's placed at 2,000 years old. Other newer dating has placed at 2,000 years old. It really comes down to the image can only have been created one way. And so you have to ask yourself, what do I believe about this shroud? If it matches all the details given to me in the biblical story, does that mean the biblical story is true? Is this actually Jesus of Nazareth we're looking at? I know there's something, and I need to do a pictorial study. Maybe the next show we do on the shroud will be one that has dozens of images that I could gather together to show how the face on the shroud is actually the same face you see repeated in early 3rd century church art of Jesus, Byzantine art, all the way down through the ages. This look that we have of Jesus that has come down through the ages to us, the slender man with gaunt features, long hair, a beard, mustache, and so on. That image is actually an image that you can find throughout history, dating all the way back to within 100 to 150 years of the time of Christ. And did they take that image from the shroud? There was one photograph I saw of an image that shows in an old Byzantine cathedral or chapel, a painting of the image of Christ that's 1800 years old. And it shows the typical image of the face that we associate with being, oh, that's Jesus. And there is a line that's painted across the neck that kind of goes this way. Just a line that's there. You don't think much of it until you look at the Shroud of Turin, and there is a fold, excuse me, in the cloth that falls right there. It's identical. I've got to show you these images, and I don't have them tonight, but we'll do a pictorial study on this because I think it's very evidentiary that the shroud is the shroud of Jesus of Nazareth. And I don't think there's a lot of things where you say you can doubt it and you can say, well, there's maybe other explanations for it and things like that. But I think it really comes down to we don't need to doubt it any further. I think it's pretty established that if it matches this guy, it's probably this guy. The probability odds are very high on this one. Is this thing on, says Professor Bauer? It is. It is indeed. For a little bit more anyway. Monica says, yes, be nice if there wasn't such a lag on comments here on YouTube. Self-entertainment God left us with questioning everything in discovery. Amen for it. Really makes good filler in life, I guess. It does. It does. Is it important to know whether the shroud is actually the shroud of Jesus? I don't think that does anything for salvific knowledge, for belief in God, or anything. The only thing that shroud could do for anybody in the category of belief is it would convince them that he was a real guy and that something supernatural happened. And that's about it. And other than that, is it really efficacious? I don't think so. I don't think there's anything wrong with knowing, though. It's like archaeology. So there you go. What do we got? It's 20 minutes of the hour. I'm tempted to end things and bring this to a close. So you got anything to say? Say it now, or forever hold your peas. I'm going to take a drink, a swig. Of not anything alcoholic, but tasty. It's actually, I've got my coffee cup full of sugar-free lemonade tonight. So, all right, folks, here's what we're going to do. I think we're going to wrap this baby. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for giving me your time. And we'll be back again on Sunday morning if all goes well. It is Friday, yeah. So day after tomorrow, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Central, with It's Sunday, pending any disaster or my untimely death. So in lieu of that, I will thank you once again for being here and bid you all a good night. And we will see you. Oh, whoa. Hold on. Hold the phone. Oh, she's like, phew, I made it before he cut off.
I just had to. It was too tempting, and the professor wasn't around to do it.
I was laying the temptation out there.
Yeah, exactly. You were just laying the bait out there, man.
I was. So tell me, what do you think of this whole Shroud thing?
I think it's pretty interesting. I think that there's a lot to be said for those who hypothesize that the fire messed with the carbon dating.
Oh, yeah.
You have that much exposure to all that soot and everything else going on. I mean, that would throw off the carbon dating. I mean, that would have to.
And really, what all of these scientists seem to come to the conclusion of is that the only thing that could place this image that is not a forged image, not a faked image, not a hand-painted image, no pigment can adhere with that few number of microns to fiber.
Right.
That the only thing that could produce it that they can conclude is some kind of electromagnetic radiation.
Interesting.
A burst.
Yeah, I caught a little bit of that.
Okay.
I was also multitasking at the same time watching the show. So that'd be interesting. If that's what can cause that transference.
Yes.
Of the image. What would it be like though? Because is it almost like doing like in a weird way an electromagnetic colloidal type photo? But then you have all of the other chemicals that are involved.
And the interesting thing is that the image of the man's back and front on the shroud are from the electromagnetic radiation would have had to come from whatever body was inside the shroud.
It's interesting.
That would have to have been the source point.
If you want to examine things from rather than a face-based perspective, but rather than a face-based perspective, faith-based.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap!
I know what
perspective, you're saying. and go with a scientific kind of perspective.
Excuse me.
You're delving into a little bit of the gross, YouTube and TikTok and Instagram videos with this one. But have you seen the videos of like fresh meat, whether it's frog leg, chicken leg,
where they've taken cadavers and tried to
where you see, they put salt on them and you see them start twitching because the salt interacts with the moisture, which interacts with the chemicals that are in there, which interacts with the neurons and everything, and makes them fire, thereby contracting the muscles. So, could that be something that could be feasible to create create a sort of an image because of the man was sitting up on a cross. It's not like, and out in the sun in the Far East. It's not like he wasn't sweating up there just from being out in the temperatures alone. Not even to mention the physical stress and strain, right? Because that's going to cause a person to sweat.
Well, and that was interesting. I don't know if you caught that part of the show, that there are all these doctors, forensic physicians from, and I forget the institution off the top of my head, that went through all these different things they found from the image in the shroud, just from the image alone.
Right. Evidence of all the various traumas and
all the various traumas, the dislocated shoulder, the
dislocated foot, right?
And a dislocated foot.
I caught that. Yeah.
And there were signs of, and I don't know what, because they're not listed here, but what are the signs of depression, they said, or of emotional exertion, torture, the kinds of emotional output that somebody who's gone through torture gives.
Yeah. And if you look at like where art was in the day, it was not like that.
No.
When you were looking at the early attempts at impressionism and things like that, a bowl of fruit's different, and that's much later when they start really getting into detail with that kind of crap. So throw that to the side. But depicting people or trying to do it in an accurate way, I mean, proportions were all off. Scale was all off, all those things, because they were still figuring out how to do depth and how to do all of that stuff. That, the only way somebody could really paint something like that on there would be either A, they're there and they have the person with all of that trauma,
Yes. To be able to replicate it
and
when
replicate
they didn't medically know of it,
or they had somebody posing and done up in that way, and even somebody posing and done up that way is not going to show the signs of internal disfiguration like a dislocation would present itself. So it's,
by the way, there was one little bit of the image I read this a long time ago, where he's got his hands and they say, well, how can his hands be perfectly placed over his genitals? That shows somebody's trying to make a modesty statement. But then they showed that the body was probably a little hunched from rigor setting in or something like that. But
well, I mean, you can even if they weren't hunched from rigor, I mean, I don't know if this is TMI, but I mean, I can place my hands standing upright.
Yeah.
I can place mine perfectly over, my block and tackle. So, and then you figure rigor mortis only lasts so long, and then everything relaxes, and then that's you can put everything where you need to put it.
There was a bit of the image where they were finding all these little pieces of this image that are now coming out with better techniques of looking into what's actually in this image.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, they're finding the leather strap around the arm. They're finding a little chain, which was like a necklace chain.
See, and you can't
broke and fell off or was placed on his chest.
You can't see any of that in the regular photos that we all see.
You can't. I've seen pictures of the head when it's really expanded.
Yeah.
You can see that there was a crown, a cap. It was like a cap crown of thorns. The leaves are still on it. And the thorns are there, and the blood matches up, of course, and all that.
Yeah.
There was also a thing with his crossed hands. I don't remember exactly how they're sitting, but there's like a thumb sticking out, or there's something somewhere, and they show that underneath one of the hands, what somebody thought was, if the hand is like down at like this angle, and you're seeing a little bit of the thumb sticking out. There was something where they said that's actually a bit of the scrotum is showing from behind the hand.
Could be.
And when they looked at it, and
another thing too, you got to figure it going back to the length of the arms and whether they're hunched up in rigor or anything like that. But like, guys' shoulders were dislocated.
Yeah,
they're going to be able to manipulate that down further.
Right.
Because it's the ball ain't in the socket, guys. Look, it's there's just so many little details that it would be hard to replicate unless you had the person right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that an artist couldn't do it. I don't think they could do it back then. Art just wasn't there. And that's just going off of, the art history kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. I think I understand why. I get the whys behind it, but it's sad that they don't allow more sample of the shroud than like, hey, here's 3 fibers.
Right.
Like give these guys something to work with so that they can sit there and they can run every battery of tests that they can come up with to figure out what's what.
I think it would be good if they could take a piece of the shroud. Of course, you don't cut the image out,
right? Or if you did it someplace that's reasonably inconspicuous.
Right, reasonably so. Right. Now there is a I cannot think of what it was called. The whip.
The cat of nine tails type stuff.
Yeah, it was a cat of nine tails, but not a cat of nine tails.
Right. Yeah.
But it had the 3 little balls on each strap.
Yeah.
And the wounds and that's a Roman thing. We know this historically. The scarring on the back of the shroud and over the front, they whip in the front too, show these stridation is not the word, these markings of triplets of these balls hitting these little bits of chunks of metal. So it's interesting. Lisa Ashby says there are some mummies from ancient Egypt would have their hands over their genitalia. Maybe that was a natural pose for the dead back in ancient times. Maybe.
Could be.
Because they took and they folded his hands over.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? We're not going to truly be able to figure anything out without more, getting more conclusive testing without being able to access more material. And like, on one hand, I understand the faith component. It's like, this is a faith thing. We don't need to prove it. On the other hand, it's like you could shut up a whole lot of people.
Sure, you could.
Had enough material to really take. And that's the thing too, is how was going back to like the carbon dating stuff and the contamination from fire and things like that. How was the shroud displayed and kept when it wasn't necessarily being openly displayed? When that fire occurred,
right?
Was it something that was folded up and it was kept in a box? Was it something that was stretched out from end to end so everybody could see it in all its glory? Like if it was folded in up on itself, and kind of tucked away when it wasn't out in view for everyone during, services or, being put out there on display for, whatever reason, if you were able to take a sample from closer to the center, if it was kind of folded up onto itself, you might actually have an instance where you have less contamination because there's an increased chance of less exposure, to everything. So it's like the science part of me is like, dude, just do it.
Yeah,
just do it.
Just do it. Let's find out.
Let's find out. I mean, but then there's the other aspect of it. If they go through everything, they find out and they're like, "Yep, this thing's a crock of crap."
Yeah.
That destroys a lot of, that undermines a lot of faith and could hurt a lot of people or leave a lot of people disillusioned and
Right.
things like that. So it's like weird balance of trying to figure out, the scales of what to do. So
yes. I am looking here as we're talking because I thought it would be really interesting to see is this image that showed this crown of thorns where you can see it really clearly for the kind of thing that it was. And I'm going to see there was one image here where you can kind of see even leaves on it. But see, and this is interesting. They show imagery here. Take a look at this. I'm going to share my screen rather than save these images and try to to save them up or post them up. Take a look at this, folks, and you too, Jason. Here, we go here and we go over to this imagery. This is the kind of crown of thorns they say is on the shroud. And that this would have been the style in the Middle East.
Okay.
Something more like that. This is from the Shroud Museum where that was taken. What they're showing on the shroud is something. What is this picture? See, they're showing something like this as being, okay, here it is. Let's see if this image opens up any bigger. Well,
yeah.
What you can see is up at the top, and you can see the blood that's there. But you can also see there's shapes in here where you could see the shapes of little leaflets coming off of the crown of the thorns and so on.
Yeah.
So that to me is really intriguing.
I keep looking away because I actually was watching, streaming it to my TV, and I muted it, and it's a much bigger image than trying to look at my phone, which is what I usually call on. So
I always thought this was pretty fascinating too, when they reconstruct the face on the shroud, that you see this something like this one that comes out. I saw somebody did a 3D from the shroud to the face to a very updated, kind of portraiture of what Jesus would have looked like. A little video that was like, wow, that's really something.
Yeah.
And
kind of like when they do the reconstructions with the pharaohs and things like that.
It was something I saw on. It was on YouTube, or I'm sorry, Instagram. I'll find it and I'll get a copy of it and show that. It was just a few seconds long. It's showing going from the image on the shroud through the 3D reconstruction to a modern painting that's perfect and makes it look very lifelike, as he would as whoever's face is on that shroud would have looked. And it's really incredible. So gives you a very human looking face coming out of that shroud. So, well, there we go. It's 10:59 and 42 seconds. So I think we're going to call it. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, no,
And,
it's a pleasure as always. I, had to slip in there at the last minute because
I'm glad you did.
somebody has to, since the
Good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're really worth anything, but
They're worth a lot. So thanks for being here, brother. I'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, maybe Sunday morning even.
All right, sounds
later.
good.
All right, everybody. Well, that's it. We're out of here. Want to thank you for being here. We're out of here for real this time, for reals. So thanks for being here. See you Sunday morning. Live long and prosper.